Here is what the students will see when they enter my messy area where I will do my business, but we also have 3 tiers in this music classroom, and with the assistance of our custodian, we have set up these 6-foot distance spaces.
Getting ready to teach and feeling the uncertainty. Teachers are back in classrooms this week, setting up, preparing for the return of school in the middle of a pandemic. Partly cloudy today with temperatures in the mid-20s, a little bit cooler, but there is sunshine in the forecast for the next few days. Colette Kennedy will join us later in the program with your full weather breakdown. I'm Katerina Georgieva. Chris is away. School hasn't started yet, but teachers are already back in the classroom getting ready for the return of students next week, after only about a quarter in both the region's English school boards elected for online learning. With more, I'm joined live by the CBC's Sanjay Maru. Sanjay, how are teachers adjusting to this new normal?
Well, Katerina, they underwent COVID-19 training this week and are putting the finishing touches to their classrooms in order. We want to start by showing you these images released by the Catholic Board earlier this morning. Just today, the board received these plexiglass dividers, part of the effort to curb the spread of COVID-19, especially for students in junior kindergarten to grade 3, where masks aren't mandatory but encouraged. In fact, the music teacher at Sandwich Secondary School showed me some of the changes he's making. Instruments replaced by desks, cabinets locked up to keep students from sharing storage space, and most importantly, a new teaching style for students come next week. One that's less about playing instruments and more about textbook-based musical theory. And that has this teacher concerned that some students may lose interest in the material altogether.
We have set up these 6-foot distance spaces. Each one has a desk and a music stand to throw their extra stuff. While we're experts in our field and we really know what we want to teach, a lot of us still don't know what we're teaching. There are elementary teachers that are still confused. There are still teachers in the classroom not sure if they're going to be in there or teaching online. So there's so much confusion that it'll be a last-minute prep over the weekend to get the first few lessons all set and ready. I'm actually more concerned about those grade 12s and the grade 9s. I think the grade 9s are a little bit more pliable. We'll be able to bend them back into a new system. The grade 12s have gone through 3 years of me and my style and our relationship building and our music creation together. And then they're going to come back and just have to hear me talk. And I feel so bad for them. I love the sound of my own voice, but I am certain that hundreds of students I've taught over the years do not agree.
Now, what you saw in that room there was actually set up just yesterday. He says he walked into the room and found his music room completely empty. He informed the principal, who was swamped with other tasks. So he brought in the school's custodian and they got right to work, spreading out tables, setting up music stands, and laying down tape. So, Katerina, just an example of how these teachers are continuing to prep just days before students return.
And Sanjay, teachers aren't the only ones preparing for this new normal. Parents are also making adjustments. So what can you tell us about that?
Well, Katerina, we reached out to officials with a group called Windsor Homeschool. They say they've been getting about 3 to 4 calls daily from new parents inquiring about homeschool for their kids. And many simply don't want to have to choose between in-person classes and online learning facilitated by schools. In fact, a mom in Leamington says the pandemic was the final push she needed to homeschool 5 of her 6 children.
It's not as scary as what it seems to be. And it is a big learning curve. Like, there's a lot that you need to learn before you jump into it. And it's just so worth it. And I'm glad that we've started. And I encourage other mothers or families to give it a try.
And officials with Windsor Homeschool estimate about 500 families are currently learning on their own. They also say the notion that homeschool children don't get as much socialization is merely false, and that many parents turn teachers, plan field trips and outings with other families taking part in unconventional learning programs. Katerina.
Thanks, Sanjay. The CBC's Sanjay Maru reporting live. And we have a better picture from the public board about what the back-to-school schedule will look like next week. Students won't be back in the class until Thursday, and when they are, they'll be divided into 2 groups based on the letters of their last names. So Group 1, with names starting with A to L, will start school on Thursday. Group 2, M to Z on Friday. That's for grades 1 to 8, and then junior and senior kindergartens will be brought in the week after that. Meanwhile, the Catholic Board is also doing a staggered start, breaking it down by grades instead of last names. Now, here's a question on the minds of many parents in this province as the start of the school year approaches. What will happen if there are cases of COVID-19 at my child's school? Our Queen's Park reporter Mike Crawley explains.
School has resumed in some provinces, and scenes like this will soon come to schoolyards around Ontario as kids head back to class over the next 2 weeks. While the merits of Ontario's plan for the return to school are up for debate, one thing is certain: cases of COVID-19 will appear among students or staff. The question is how many and whether they spread.
I think that we probably are going to see cases here and there, though I think that these will be picked up relatively quickly.
When a student or staff member tests positive for COVID-19, here's what's supposed to happen. The Public Health Unit informs the school about the case. The school must post the news on its website without identifying the individual. And anyone who had close contact with the case at the school would get notified directly by Public Health.
They would, very quickly take this as a high priority and organize that all the other students in that cohort and the teacher be sent home and isolated. And if they develop symptoms, get tested.
If a school sees 2 or more confirmed cases that appear to be linked, Public Health must declare an outbreak.
When an outbreak happens, what that means is that, in general, the public health will look a bit more closely. They might, number one, make decisions on closing certain classes, closing the entire school, but also they'll do a lot more extensive testing.
There's no specific number of cases that would trigger closing a school. The province's guidelines just say public health should consider closure if there's evidence of widespread transmission.
That is when we would be considering possibly either closing just certain classes or the whole school. It depends on where the cases are and how much they've mixed with others. And are they all in the same grade? Are they in different grades?
To try to reduce the chances of widespread transmission, parents are urged not to send their kids to school if they're showing any symptoms of COVID-19. If a student becomes sick during the school day, they're to be isolated immediately until a parent can come take them home. Mike Crawley, CBC News, Toronto.
Cab drivers in Windsor say they're struggling to get fares. Even with businesses, bars, and restaurants having reopened, they say fares are fewer and further in between compared to other years, and that makes it harder to make ends meet. Jacob Barker has more.
Andom Gabreski is waiting for a fare to come in, but he has to be patient.
There's 2 cars ahead of me from 301 and another 3 cars ahead of me from 302.
These zones are prime picking for cabbies at this time of year. Usually, an influx of students would normally be arriving to start classes.
Especially Friday and Saturday night from downtown restaurant. You don't wait that long, you got it.
But this year, with most learning taking place online, those fares aren't there. Gabreski says he sat and waited for fares to come in for hours at a time.
Last year at this time we used to make good money for a living. Now we are struggling to pay our lease.
Well, it's not just student fares that drivers are missing out on. The border has been closed for months, and that means tourists are scarce. And here at the casino, it's a bit of a ghost town, and this is usually a prime spot for drivers to find rides. For driver Fadi Nizam, it was enough to get him out of the business altogether.
I just sold my cab, a few days ago.
He's looking for a new gig.
We cannot survive from the driving cab anymore.
He says the payoff for drivers just isn't worth it.
It's lack of business, you go, you put, example, 8 hours on the road or 9 hours on the road, you can hardly survive. This car will cost you, between plate lease and dispatch and insurance, you're talking about $550 a week.
Gabreski, however, is sticking with it. He still finds meaning in the job despite the pandemic.
What makes me satisfied is there's so many senior citizens, people they don't have car, people they don't use visa for Uber, they expect our service. So when I give them those services, it satisfied me. That's why we are for.
Satisfaction in the job he does, but also a hope for things to go back to normal. and a time when the riders come back. Jacob Barker, CBC News, Windsor.
Researchers at the University of Windsor have been studying our sewage systems to track COVID-19 in the area. We first told you about this a few months ago, but since then they've proven that they can detect the virus by studying feces. They've been getting weekly samples from 4 wastewater treatment plants in Windsor, Essex, sharing their data with local health officials. So how much further can this go? Well, a school in the States has proven that this kind of research can actively help prevent outbreaks. So I checked in on how things are going here and got a tour of the lab where the magic happens. Okay, so I understand you got some fresh samples today.
We do. So as I mentioned, one of the municipalities we're working with, part of the pilot is the town of Lakeshore. So today was my regular day to be picking up a weekly sample from the Dennis St. Pierre wastewater treatment plant in Lakeshore. And I'm here to process it. And for your viewers, this is what a sample of raw wastewater looks like. You might be underwhelmed. I know when I first started working with wastewater, I wasn't expecting this, so I was pleasantly surprised. But remember, these samples are highly diluted because of the water stream. So the first step here is I'm going to filter the sample. Right now, we're mainly working with our municipal partners and the health units. The way I view this right now is that we have a method up and running. We're establishing more or less of a baseline. We know that Canada and the province of Ontario have been quite successful with their mitigation measures of flattening the curve. There's a lot of concern over the coming weeks with students returning back to schools. So what we're looking at right now is, do we have a baseline, and by continuing our weekly or maybe even bi-weekly sampling moving forward, will we start seeing changes from that baseline trend, upticks in the presence of the virus in our wastewater? This could give us a bit of a head start, the health unit a bit of a head start in implementing additional mitigation measures to help control the virus. So we have a filtrate here, which we're going to use in this next machine. This instrument will draw up our sample, concentrate the particles onto a filter, and then elutes those particles back into a small volume. That sample will basically be put into a little cryotube. These are tubes that can withstand very low temperatures. And then I brought some liquid, some dry ice today. I usually either store them in liquid nitrogen or on dry ice.
The University of Arizona was actually able to prevent an outbreak at a dormitory because they were able to identify COVID-19 in their sewage system. So can we see something like that happening here? Yeah, this is exactly how we envisioned this method being applied. The ability to, basically looking at this as sort of a community swab. We know the challenges that we've encountered in rolling out individual testing throughout the province and the country. So being able to look at a pooled sample like this. Now, right now, we're working mainly with our wastewater treatment plants, which is sort of the final destination of the sewage before it gets treated. Ideally, we'd like to start increasing the resolution of our sampling. So you can start now targeting residential facilities that might be at higher risk because people are living together. So we have a proposal in to implement the same things that you saw in Arizona, that's happening in Utah State right now, to use wastewater as an early warning for infection in our residential facilities. The University of Windsor isn't the only lab working on this. There are 9 labs across the country participating in an interlaboratory study which recently launched. They're all working to detect COVID in sewage, and now through phase 1 of this national study, they're sharing samples, comparing methods, in the hopes of fine-tuning their own research. Above and beyond, these Windsor police personnel are being recognized for going the extra mile on the job, like one who used technology to locate a missing person and another who comforted someone in crisis. The Police Service's Hero of the Year awards were presented this afternoon, and both recipients say they were just doing their jobs.
There was an individual who was in crisis, and we needed to get him police to basically get him some help, right? So what I did was just use all of the technology that Windsor Police has at our disposal to connect the male to life-saving efforts. So specifically using his cell phone location and our officer's cell phone location to connect the two parties to each other.
It was another day of doing my job. Unfortunately, this incident occurred on Christmas Day. And knowing that Christmas is usually all about family, it hits home a little bit harder, right? You don't ever want anyone to experience anything, and then specifically around holidays or it's harder. So humbled, surprised, and just appreciative that she would take the time to forward a nomination on.
A cloudy day, bit of a breeze outside, feels like another step towards autumn. Colette Kennedy will join us after the break with your full weather forecast. Stay with us. Colette Kennedy joins us now for full weather forecast. Colette, I was outside today. It felt a little bit chilly and I almost thought, okay, it might be time for a pumpkin spice latte.
I know. My Tim's app sent me a thing today that to get a pumpkin spice. I'm like, already? I mean, I knew they were coming, then I remember, oh yeah, it's September.
It's that time.
It is. I actually like them. It's just, it was like, oh yeah, it's September, right. Second day of September, here we go, advertise at this time of year. You know what? We were still a little on the warm side. We've got another day tomorrow. There's one more where we're going to be on the warm side, and then some cooler air is coming in for the holiday weekend. And as for our lows, boy, we were on the warm side with that too. But cooler air moving in, and yeah, Kat was talking about feeling it because we're behind this kind of frontal boundary. Our winds turn towards the west. They actually weren't that bad, not too blustery. I think one of the strongest wind gusts I saw was just over 40 kilometers an hour. And these are our sustained winds, but it's kind of about the direction that once the front went through, those winds changing not from so much of a southerly flow, that coming in more from a westerly flow. So our current temperature is still holding in the mid-20s and getting a humidex value there in either the upper 20s to the low 30s there for Chatham-Kent. And we do have dry conditions because everything has moved well off to the east, but late day tomorrow, we're going to see another little frontal boundary come through. It's not going to have a lot of moisture with it. The point about it is that it's going to bring the dew points down, it's going to bring temperatures down, but also take the humidity out of the air. And so that's the one that's going to be important. We'll have kind of a mix of sun and cloud earlier in the day, then a lot of sunshine into the afternoon. I've stopped this at 5 p.m. because that's that little frontal boundary. So like I say, most of the heavier rain will be up here towards Lake Huron. We may get some showers certainly coming through into the evening. It's going to be more about the changes in terms of how the air mass is going to feel. That's what's going to be important about this one. Overnight tonight, in terms of those temperatures, I was just showing you a moment ago what our lows were from last night, right around just over, in fact, 20. So this is where it's going to be feeling a little bit different. We are getting kind of a clearing trend, so that's going to be different in terms of our sky conditions. But seeing these lows coming in from 13 to 14, I wouldn't be surprised if anyone drops down to about 12 as well. I said there'd be heat, still heat for tomorrow. So the system that went through, even though it changed the wind direction, we still have those temperatures going up with that sunshine that we'll be seeing through the day, so upper 20s. We still have some humidity as well. We're going to be feeling like we're in the low 30s because those winds changing back to more of a southwesterly flow, coming in 20 to 30 kilometers an hour. So there you have it for your Thursday. But then, if you're getting a jump on the holiday weekend, maybe you've got Friday in there as well, that's when that cooler, more comfortable air comes in, 23. Saturday, still some warm, mid-20s. And then Sunday, we get into that chance of showers, the next system kind of pushing in here. And that does take us into Monday, too, where we have that chance of seeing some wet conditions in there as well into Monday.
You know, it does make me a little bit nervous seeing, you know, the 20-something range, but the sunshine is nice because I still have beach plans.
You still have beach plans? I think you're going to be, you know, you'll be okay. It's the kind of thing where you take something, a long sleeve, something that you can kind of put on at times if you need it.
Right, maybe not as much tanning, but, you know, you can still enjoy it. All right.
Absolutely, you can.
Thanks so much, Colette.
You're welcome.
We have an update on the mysterious poisoning of a Russian opposition leader now being treated in Berlin. I'll bring you the latest when we come back. We've got an update for you tonight about the lawsuit involving a police officer and Toronto Raptors president Masai Ujiri. The officer's legal team alleges Ujiri's counterclaim of the incident that happened at the NBA Finals is driven by race and a bias against law enforcement. Ujiri's claim last month included this video of the altercation, which showed the officer, Alan Strickland, violently shoving the Raptors executive as he tried to get on the court after the team won the NBA title. Ujiri says he was reminded in that moment that some people will see him as unworthy of respectful engagement because he is Black. Testing has determined that Russian opposition leader Alexei Navalny was poisoned with a Soviet-era nerve agent. German authorities made the announcement today and demanded a transparent investigation. Navalny, who is a fierce critic of Russian President Vladimir Putin, is being treated in Berlin. CBC's Chris Brown has more.
Well, the language from Germany's government is very clear and very concise about what they believe happened to Alexei Navalny. Their statement is saying there is now unequivocal evidence of a chemical nerve agent of the Novichok type that was used to poison Alexei Navalny about 2.5 weeks ago now. Now, this is the same weapons-grade nerve agent that was used in the attack on Yulia and Sergei Skripal in Salisbury, England, back in 2018. This is an attack that the United States and the United Kingdom believe was perpetrated by Russian Secret Service agents. They even have photographic evidence of these men being in that area at the time. But this raises many disturbing questions. Who exactly authorized this attack? This is not the kind of substance that's readily available just to anyone. It was developed in the Soviet Union. It was kept in a secret location. The stockpiles were supposedly destroyed at the end of the Cold War, but of course, as we know, some was used in the earlier attack. But who authorized this? If it was Vladimir Putin, well, that's terrifying that he used this to attack his biggest political opponent. If it wasn't Vladimir Putin, it's equally terrifying because it means someone else didn't feel that they need this high level of approval, and they went and they did it themselves. One of Navalny's advisors is already saying on Twitter that this is essentially, because it was Novichok, as though Putin has left his autograph at the scene of the crime. Alexei Navalny is now recovering in hospital in Berlin. All we know is that he was severely injured by this attack. If it wasn't for the fact that the airline pilot who was flying him back to Moscow from Siberia, if he hadn't have landed, Navalny would probably be dead by now. We haven't had an update. We just know that his condition is improving and it's no longer life-threatening. In terms of Russian reaction, well, already we're starting to hear a direction it may go. Some Kremlin news sources are saying, well, this couldn't have been Novichok, because if it was Novichok, it would have had some different kind of effect. So from the very beginning, they've tried to suggest that there was no merit to these allegations. In fact, this is likely something Navalny did to himself. That's going to be much more difficult to prove. Last time, we know that the EU and NATO countries imposed many diplomatic and economic sanctions on Russia because of the Skripal attack. And we understand right now that the Germans are having similar discussions with their Western allies. Chris Brown, CBC News, Moscow.
It is 6:29 p.m. That is it for CBC Windsor News. Don't forget, for news anytime, you can go to our website at cbc.ca/Windsor. We're on social media as well. Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. Power and Politics is up next. Have yourselves a wonderful evening.